I just dropped my head. I said, God, you would not do this to me. I just started crying. I said, God, you would not do. Heaven was so quiet, I could hear a pin drop. If you don't care who gets the credit, you can have more influence. An orphan spirit is normally part of a very successful person, because to overcome the feeling of not belonging that creates value, you believe that you have to literally perform to be accepted. There is no such thing as a Christian business. Show me when it got saved, show me if it's going to heaven. The anointing is to lift up, and you're not anointed if you put yourself down. That is not humility, that is stupidity.
Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep. What's up, crew? Welcome back to the deep ends. Jake, you ready for this?
So ready.
I have somebody who is super important, and I cannot wait to introduce you to him. I didn't even ask him how he wanted me to describe him, so I figured I would just go on a whim,
Okay,
and just break down how you've helped me real fast, and then we'll have a good time. I read a book probably in 2016, 2017, around that era. We had just moved to Nashville. It was early on, and a person at the church had sent it to me, and I was going through a wrestle because the things that I wanted to happen were not happening, and I couldn't figure out where God was in the middle of it. And so I kind of just decided to stop talking to God. I was like, if you're not going to help me, I'm not going to talk to you. Super brilliant.
yes.
And they sent me this book, and the book was called "And David Perceived He Was King." And so I picked up this book thinking it was just going to be a quick read because it's a shorter book. And it took me so long to read because I had to highlight so many parts of the book. I probably got 160 highlights from it. And you wrote this book, you wrote several other books. And then years later, my wife texted me and said, hey, do you remember that book you read called "And David Perceived He Was King"? And I said, obviously. Like, I've given away 20 copies of it. And she said, well, they're in town and we got connected. Do you want to go get pizza? And I said, get pizza with Dale Mast? She said, yeah. I said, yes, I'll be there. Where are we going? And you and your wife, we got to meet you for the first time. This was only like it was actually closer to a year ago.
Yeah.
At this point. And I'm telling this to say, like, when something arrests me and like gets my attention and slows me down to the point where I have to read a book multiple times, it's a pretty big deal. And that's what happened. And I've read Shattering the Limitations of Pain and several of the other ones. And we have a rule now. Me and my wife joke about this. If Dale and Luann are at the table, someone has to be recording because stuff just comes out of you. And then I'm like, I will forget that. Do you remember when you sat down and you said that who God picks, he is picky with?
Yes.
I was like, hold on. I have to write this down. You said something else about be careful. God will test you to see how much glory you can handle before you start shoplifting. It's another writer downer. Like, every time I've had a conversation with you, it's literally changed the way that I view God and the world. So thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here with you.
And thanks for writing your books.
Well, I tell you what, writing that book was a journey, an inner journey with God. And I learned 50% of that book as I wrote it. It was a journey with
That's
God.
incredible.
It was not my years of study. 50% was my years of study. The rest was revelation.
Yep. They're used to that here because you know how we describe what this show is not me teaching. It's like me processing out loud with God. And they're going to be used to that. So what is that? What is that noise?
Cameron, is that your computer overheating there? It might be. Yeah.
You want us to buy you a new computer? Okay, so can I just take people through a bit of what you've taught me and some of your book? And I think what we could do is we could extrapolate on some of these. You're a person who has been, you are deeply familiar with pain.
Yes.
Which people wouldn't know because you're so happy and joyful all the time. But you've been through it. So I'm going to read this real fast, and I just want to talk about it. You wrote in David Perceived He Was King. You said, the closer we get to our destiny, the greater the resistance and frequency of tests. The closer it comes, the harder it is to resist making it happen. When it seems as if all hell breaks loose, we keep pressing forward. We are about to go through a very important door to our destiny. At one point in my ministry, I received incredible promotion and honor from a group of people, and years later it fell apart. Having expected to be ushered into my destiny through the situation, I questioned God. He replied, "You were looking for them to promote you to the next level. The only reason you were offended by their actions is because you looked to them as your source, and I could not allow it to work out for you. It would have limited your future and our relationship. You call this the David test. Can we still believe for our destiny when our obvious ladder to success has been burnt, or will we give in to bitterness and hatred?"
It's not an easy test, but for those who are called to greatness, it is normal. And if you've never really been tested severely, you do not have a great future in front of you. Some of you should be much happier right now because you took the test as a disapproval instead of a benchmark of God clearing in your heart hidden motives,
Wow.
insecurities, and God saying, I need to test you at another whole level if I'm going to give you this place of authority and influence that will affect many people. I need to check you out from the heart up.
Well, that sucks.
And he gets picky with those he picks. And this is the deal. Think about this. When a coach receives a Cy Young Award, a winner pitcher on his team, he expects more of that pitcher than anyone else. Mm-hmm. And so God is just like that good coach. And when he knows what you can do, then he starts asking you to do more because he now has hit a vein of gold. He's hit a treasure in you, and he wants to draw it all out. And he's going deeper than you planned to do more than you ever thought.
Dale, what is the reason that you have picked David over so many other characters in the Bible? Is it because you resonate with him the most? Why have you studied David to the extent that you have?
That's a very good question. This is a misconception I had about David. I saw him as sort of the young guy with a silver spoon, born in his mouth, everything going his way. And when I hit the scripture that said, and David perceived that God had established him as king over Israel for the people's sake, I realized the crown was resting on David's head. They're calling him King David, and he doesn't perceive it. He doesn't believe it because everything that David had was always taken from him.
Wow.
And to the point that when he became king, he thought, is this going to be taken from me too?
Wow.
So think about it. David, he's watching the sheep. His brothers put him down. When he goes to the battle, he's supposed to get Merab. That was the oldest daughter of King Saul. On his wedding day, she was given to another man. Public humiliation. Everybody knew David on his wedding day. Think about that. Given to another man. And then King Saul gives him Michal because she was his wild child. Said, she has given me such a headache. I know she'll ruin David. And so, but when David fled for his life, she was given to another man. Now David, he led the armies. Now he's being chased by the same. And David is at Ziklag, and he's hiding with this Philistine king, goes out to battle. They turn him back from the battle saying maybe David will, because they're fighting against King Saul. And so they have to go back. All the men are tired. I can get into that a little bit later more. But they didn't really, when you went to battle, you took enough food to go there to win. You didn't take enough food to lose. You either won, brought back what they had. So they're coming back. They didn't get to fight. And everything's gone. Ziklag, David's worst day. His own men talked about killing him. Now that's not a good weekend. David strengthened himself in God. So what David did, he lifted himself up out of probably one of the most horrific situations of personal loss, and his own leaders wanted to kill him. And God said, because you passed this test at Ziklag, David, you're stellar, and I will not only give you the throne. He went up to Judah. Israel opposed him. Actually, the house of Saul fought him for 7.5 years. 7.5 years he had to struggle through to become king over all Israel. He had to win over the house of Saul, but gently, because he had to lead them in the future. There are some people you have to win over, but do it gently, because you have to lead that crowd in the future. So then David becomes king, and he's thinking, I know I'm king, but is this mine to enjoy? Do I get to keep this? And there was such a, I don't know if you want to call this I wouldn't call it a panic, but there have been so many shocks to David's system that when he arrived, he really couldn't totally relax until after another king built him a palace. Then David relaxed and he said, I have the favor to do what God has called me to do. And everything shifted.
Wow. So we had trauma.
Trauma and drama off the chart. And what I realized in this world, that you look at people who have greatly succeeded, they've gone through great trauma and drama. Whenever somebody is handed millions of dollars, they're ruined. But when somebody's handed a challenge, the greatness that that's required in the journey sustains what they achieve and what they literally possess.
Is this how you felt is how David has felt? Has that been something that's really resonated into your life? Have you felt similar to David in a lot of ways throughout your life as you've studied him?
Very much so. Let me just tell you a little story. In my book, I put it in there, I had been a pastor at 30 years old. I thought that's interesting. David became a king of Judah at 30. And I don't put it all in there in the book because my father was still alive. But my father, who was very successful in business, was in the charismatic movement, pushed forward as a leader. He didn't really want to be a pastor, but literally they said, why don't you lead it? He did it for 3 years. And there were things in his life that I realized he was kind of like a bulldozer, clear land.
Yeah.
But then after he built it, he would sort of push it over. Yeah. If you wanted a miracle, go to my dad. He had an amazing love, but he was raised by an orphan. And really, my grandfather died at a young age, about 52. So my father actually became sort of the father, the oldest. And so there were things, and I'm not going to go any further into that. But when I became pastor, it's a whole story. Literally, the church doubled in the first 6 months. My father became jealous. Actually, started telling people not to come to my church. I got a call from my mother, said, come over, talk to Dad. He was wailing, weeping. He'd had a nervous breakdown. And he said, Dale, I just want to say, I'm just jealous of you. Would you forgive me? Wow. And I did. And, and in the middle of this, my wife then, Miriam, who passed away of cancer at 55, she was in the middle, my wife was in the middle of a nervous breakdown because she so looked up to my father and the attack against her and me by my father in the middle of all this mess. And so in it, I thought we're through it. And then after 3 days, my dad come back and he said, the covering, the church that was over us, the one man said to my dad, I sense you turned the church over to your son too early. The other man said to me, well, really, your father needs to let go of it. And I found out 10 years later that covering, that the man who was over it was in a 3-year affair, and his church of 3,000 was going to 300. And I heard him share his testimony. I went back in the timeline, and I realized that when we were going through our problem, he was having his meltdown. So that was the confusion. I had to actually have to forgive him. He's saying he was praying that he would go down in an airplane in flames. I said, I'm almost praying with it. Now I have to forgive. Release it. But see, God was doing all this for a purpose. Now this is where I'm going to go. There's a purpose behind this. So my dad said to me, he said, Dale, we need to go forward. I'll be the chairman, you be the pastor. I said, Dad, well, this group, the whole reason we went with them was the pastor's the chairman. I said, now I'll tell you this. Now, this is where honor comes in, and this is where you learn something. This building was worth $500,000, and we're back in 1984. The church was packed out before the problem. Now we're down to 70 people, what I started with.
Wow. Counting
kids. And if they brought a little doll, I'll count that too. Anyway, so, and I said to Dad, because I knew this principle, that if I would honor him, it would go well with me. So I said to Dad, I said, you tell me what you want. Either I'll turn the church over to you and I'll leave. I believe I'll come back in my heart and do it, or you turn it over to me. And he said, well, Dale, turn it over to me. So that morning, I'm driving to church. My wife is not crying on the edge of a nervous breakdown. She's smiling. And we're going, because now we're going to pack up, go to Iowa. The pressure's off of the last 3 months, which was insane.
Wow.
Okay. So I get there and I just call up my dad. I'm actually happy. I was going to preach a sermon. I will pour out my spirit. I will build my church and I will return, and I'm leaving, but the church will be fine. My dad's taking over. And I was happy. Happy. And so I called up my dad and I said, hey, Dad, we're going to do an offering. And, my father is a man of integrity. And I said, we should tell people what we're going to do with the offering. He said, well, why don't we give it to Stephen Rathod? Now, Stephen Rathod played a very interesting part. He was the man who now pastors that church out in Texas. He brought it back to life, but he was coming as an evangelist when my dad said, Dale, I think you're supposed to be the pastor. And I said, I don't think I want it, Dad, because it's like the church went through splits. I didn't understand that my dad didn't have that gift, and there's some other things. But so through it, Stephen Rathod, he comes and he looks at my dad, and my dad said, has God spoken anything about the church? He said, I told God I wasn't going to say it unless you asked me, but I had a dream, and your son's the pastor, and you're releasing the church to him. And that's how I came in by a dream. So now I'm here at this point of division, and he said, let's give it to Stephen Rathod. And so I'm getting ready to preach. I'm happy, got the offering planned, and I'm packing. We're going to Iowa. And my dad calls back. He said, I changed my mind.
What?
He said, you keep the people and I'll keep the building. And I just dropped my head. I said, God, you would not do this to me. And I just started crying. I said, God, you would not do. He did not. Heaven was so quiet, I could hear a pin drop. What I didn't realize was God was really wanting to be my father, and he wanted to bless me through this. And literally, this is part of the story. With $50 in the bank account, God said, I want you to go buy land. I didn't have to have a board meeting. There was nothing to talk about. We had no savings. $50, a word from God, is actually the beginning of miracles. Some of you have too much to believe God.
Dang.
Wow.
So in it, I go to look, and we go back to this piece of land. Now, this is very interesting. Remember, I honored my father. Okay? And we drove past it. It was sold. We went around the corner. They were selling the land for $5,000 an acre. But on the main east-west in Dover, there was like 110 acres. And I asked the guy. He said, "Oh, what's sold?" And a month later, he said, that land is for sale. It fell through the third time. And so we went out and talked. There was a school teacher. We ended up raising money the Sunday morning. I did not know this. The offering, because we were so beat down, I think it was around $330 some. But the Lord said, raise an offering for $2,000 to bind it. We did it, put the money down. Long story short, we ended up buying it, 42 acres for about $100,000. Looked like $1 million back then. Okay, yeah. But you know what's interesting? I found out later, my father, my uncles and aunts, all the leaders of that church had walked on that land, claimed it for God,
Wow.
all of the land. Now, this is the part you'll love. And then they bought the building in town that I actually released to my father. I bought the 42 acres that actually, the $50, and the value of that over the years, probably accumulated value, turned into $5 million.
Wow.
I'm not crying anymore.
Nope.
Now in this is the part. Because I honored my father, the prayers he prayed over that land came to me.
You would have blocked it if you didn't.
Yeah. And so the thing is, can you honor people that do not honor you? That's what makes you a David.
Wow.
Oh, jeez.
Can you keep on dreaming in the middle of a nightmare? That's what makes you a David. Now, let me tell you why I'm writing on David. Amos and Acts says God will restore the tabernacle of David. It's not just a place of worship. It's a place of people that are after God's heart. Not people who have God's heart, people who are after God's heart. That's David. So in it, I could tell you one story after, but God restored my relationship with my father. And it was an amazing journey, but I knew that when I went through this vortex of darkness, God was saying, can you keep your eye on the light of the promise? Because if you can see light in the darkness, you can handle the sunrise of destiny. And so to me, as I started looking at David's life, I realized he was very much like me, very much like you, very much like everyone in this world. But everybody has the challenges of David, but will you make the choices of David?
Wow.
That's great.
Now, think about this. God didn't choose him because he was the brightest, the strongest. God said, I found a man after my heart.
Right.
Do you know what that means to me? It means if you're in business, your business and the way you do it is going to be truthful, clean. It's going to bless people. God wants to prosper some of you business owners to create jobs for people. Their genius is not creating a business. Their genius is managing the people. Their genius is running that machine. Their genius is making a product. See, because whenever you enter into what God has called you to do, it opens up doors for other people's their call. Not everyone's called to do what you do. And that's why when you have a business, you can't just turn it over sometimes to even an assistant because they don't have the same call.
Right.
And why would you want to be successful and get lazy? You need to keep on using your genius, create another business.
Yep, 100%. People are very confused about that right now. A lot of business owners, they are actually just, it's a means of escape for them. And they want to build it to sell it or build it to retire or build it. Like they don't, the understanding I've had to grow in is that if I'm not operating at what God's gifted me to do, no matter how much freedom I have, I won't be happy. I won't be fulfilled.
Yeah. And I will tell you what I told a man who had been a pastor, went into being an executive pastor for a larger church after a very hurtful situation in this successful smaller church. And I said this to him. I said, if you don't do what draws your genius, your attention, you're going to lose it. In other words, you were created with a genius, and if you'll do what literally attracts your desires, you're going to flower. And you know what ended up happening out of that? He actually is now in charge of creating the master's program at Regent University.
Wow. That's amazing.
For the online part. They gave him full access. I was just talking to him a month ago.
Nice.
Because he went after what was his desire instead of looking to settle for something he could. I mean, you can only enjoy Florida for so long. Sunrises, going to the beach. You were made for purpose. Your purpose actually should bring delight to your journey.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that real fast. How old are you?
I'm now a 72.
72-year-old, still building traveling. You just you were telling me that I think you just got back from a small tour that you did, but you're frequently speaking at conferences and you're writing books. You're writing 2 books right now.
Yeah, we're at 2 or 3 to 5 somewhere. I keep
3 to
throwing
5
them
is
around.
like just writing everything. I want to talk about how you keep when you said when David went and strengthened himself in the Lord, you know how to do that. And that's probably a linchpin for a lot of people because they get fatigued, they get tired, they end up settling, like you said, way too early. How have you found your energy and your drive, and how do you interface with Holy Spirit? How do you strengthen yourself in the Lord and keep your energy where it is? Because you're still like, you're far from finished. People retire when they hit your age, and you're not. You're not doing that.
Well, see, and I'm 72. I've lived long enough to see young people with old vision and old people with new vision. Mm-hmm. I, in the last 2 years, have totally shifted my identity, my purpose, and my influential, how can I say this, vision of influence. And in it, if you don't have fresh vision, you have no reason to wake up.
Yep.
Fresh vision actually causes you to think differently, step into a new identity, and actually to entertain greatness at another level, which I want to say this, God created greatness in the DNA of every person. I don't care if it's serving somebody with excellence. I don't care if it's running a large multi-billion company or managing, overseeing other people. There's something about when people move in what they were created to do, it actually becomes a meaning and a delight to life. And actually, when you help other people make their destiny, that becomes a greater joy and a completion of your own.
Yeah. I was telling this to a group of clients yesterday, actually. Mm-hmm. You know those seasons where you get into where it's just like, it almost feels like death by 1,000 cuts?
Yeah.
Like anything that could go wrong feels like it's going wrong. From the little things to the big things, it's like just one more thing is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. We were teaching on mindset and healthy mindset, and I was telling these people, like one of the secrets that I've found is actually encouraging and giving life to other people. And last week was a really stressful week for me. I just gotten back in town from a lot of travel. You know, when you get back, you're just like, it's like a mulligan week. Like everything's happening, but nothing gets done because you're like interfacing back in. And so it was it was Wednesday, and I was going to pick up food in Cool Springs. And I was back to back meetings. And for people who don't know, like, I don't like people. I like being by, if I want to like have the best evening ever, it's just like pick one of those books behind you, sit down with the candle. That's my dream scenario. Like the opposite of Jake.
Yeah.
You're more of a people.
Yeah, I'm having a great time. I'm enjoying your presence still. We're good.
That doesn't mean I don't like hanging out with you. It just means like, I'm like, when it's back to back meetings, I'm like, I can't even think anymore. I'm like giving out to so many people. So I go into this restaurant, and there's this little old woman who was giving me food, and she just, some people have like you could tell they just have the joy of the Lord. They're just shining. And I just said, "You look so pretty today." This little old woman, and man, she just lit up. It's like she was so happy. And I was telling people that I think I walked into that restaurant tired, and I walked out of that restaurant. I think I felt better about giving her a compliment than she felt about receiving it. And there's something almost divine about encouraging and uplifting other people that keeps you energy. It keeps your energy high.
Okay.
So
I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So now I'm asking you, what do you think happened that made you feel better?
I think I just made her happy.
Okay. But I want to describe it in another way.
Okay.
You were tired when you let literally the love of God, the life that was in you, pass through you to her. It lit something in you. What you allow to pass through you to help other people becomes life even to yourself.
Wow.
And in it, that's why when I help somebody else, God, literally the anointing of my purpose, I start to vibrate with life. I break off the tiredness. When I am getting ready to go into a large meeting to minister, I will look for somebody outside the meeting to minister to for two reasons. If you only encourage people in church, you become religious, and the heathen keep you clean. You have to be truthful. In other words, I'm not saying that if I don't know if a person's a Christian or not, and I have to minister, now I have to really come with God, not my little sayings. So like yesterday, I was at Buco de Beppo picking up some meatballs, and I say something to this one guy, and I start talking to him about what I see with him taking a pencil and he's pushing down numbers and pulling up other numbers, and I talk about his gift, his ability. So the buzzers go off. He runs out. He said, "I'll be right back." He runs back to see me and to talk to me. Then the guy behind, I said, "I see you like a mechanic." And I said, if people can show you something, you can do it. So what's very interesting, my father is a mechanic. And so I started talking to him, but I could just tell, literally, it changed the whole atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And when I start to minister to people outside of church, I will actually see people come over with the look in their eyes, what about me? Because, see, when you minister out of the Spirit, that person was created with the Spirit. And so when you minister from your spirit to their spirit, something enlarges in your own spirit, and you're not dead wood, but you're a living, breathing son of God. And when that life comes through you to other people, it actually gives a delight. I want to say this also. If you're a business owner, you to get a contract that blesses your business, that should be life in your spirit. It's not just money. It's you were made to make a contract. And I always say this, if you walk into a room so you can win, you're already compromised. Ooh. You should walk into a room to help somebody else win. You should have already won. And when you help other people win, do you know what's interesting? What you sow, you reap. If you're going to get a contract, don't think about how you can win it. Think about how your contract can cause them to win.
That might be a good segue for you to tell Jake the time you called me a prostitute.
Oh yes, I would love to hear it.
I said,
He's told me so much about your conversations, by the way.
No, I'm just so good. Drop you off there, then you please swim yourself out. Okay, you want me to set it up for you?
Say the comment, because when I say things, how did I say it?
We were sitting at my living room table. I was about to go speak in front of about 30,000 people. And I was telling you about kind of what God's doing with our businesses, and I was kind of in a place where I might have actually had some David tendencies, because I couldn't really believe it. And I was kind of wrestling with I don't want to mess it up. Like if, the last thing that I built that was really big was taken from me and blah, 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 blah. And I was telling you about this, and you said, you looked at me and you were like, I want to tell you something. I was like, okay, here we go. And you said, when you go into a room and you're receiving cues about how you performed from your audience, you're just a highly paid prostitute. When you're receiving the praise or the criticism of the audience around you, you said what you need to do is you need to think to yourself when you walk in, wisdom just walked into the room, and you are just obedient to what God wants you to say, rather than transactionalizing and bastardizing what God wants you to say based on the approval of other people.
So whenever you are looking for acceptance, it's a prostituting spirit. I'll give you this, you give me acceptance. And so, but when you go in and you give other people acceptance, that's a fathering anointing.
Wow.
And so you don't have to be that old. You just have to be that set, comfortable in your own skin, realizing that you don't just have a gift, you are the gift. Whoa. And when you realize that you are a gift, then what's in your genius starts to literally flow out of you effortlessly, because you're not trying to please them. You're trying to, so they'll be pleased with you. You're not giving them something so they'll give something back to you. You're giving something to them and receiving them to lift them up. And so it's a whole different dynamic. And it unlocks your ability to hear the wisest things from heaven you'll ever know, because you're connected into a realm that's beyond you, but not without you.
Mm. And that was the story.
I think I remember a little bit of
I
it.
decided not to be that. Well, can I ask you some questions about praise specifically?
Yeah.
So, because my background is music.
Yes.
Then I got into real estate and business. But even today, I've noticed that I'm not 100% free around receiving praise. In fact, I was just on a call with someone this morning who called me out on it. And they were like, if I called you and I said, hey, you're really messing this up, you would lean in. Thank you for giving me the feedback. You would even take notes about it. But whenever I tell you that something was amazing, I can see you just shut it. You sort of distance yourself from it. And I think that the reason that this is part of how, like, it's just a natural instinct, is because I've really struggled with pride in my career. And I don't know how to accept positive feedback because I don't exactly understand how to receive it without taking it. You are the best at this.
I'm learning too.
And even now, like, this is something that I still wrestle with a little bit. Because my natural instinct is like, if I do an amazing job and somebody says, you did an amazing job, it seems to be one of the extremes. It's like, either just reject it, or I'm like, yeah, I did an
let's go
amazing
through
job.
the what we've been religiously taught to say when somebody comes up to you and says, you did an amazing job.
Oh yeah, I hate this. Like, oh, it's all God, man.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. It was all God. Yeah.
Okay, so in that,
Sound
I'm
familiar?
so glad you're bringing this
Yeah.
up.
yeah, okay, so let's talk about this. So what you're at that point when you say it's not me, it's all Him. So you're saying God could do that through that mic stand? Are we that stupid? Are we? Yes, we are. See, we're religiously stupid. We've been,
Yeah.
I will tell you why. I want to just go back to where it's all seated in. Because Lucifer would not give worship to God, he has made a bottleneck over the church where we don't know how to be celebrated and still give the worship to God. And he is confused in the religious mind that if somebody is celebrating you, they're worshiping you. Celebration is healthy. Worshiping someone is not. So in this, if people come up and celebrate you, know this, that's God's opinion coming through a man, because everything is established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. So when somebody celebrates you, that was really great. First of all, you should think, Lord, you're having them celebrate me in this venue for me to take note. This is something I should stick with.
Wow.
If I do something that's not celebrated, it's probably not my main call. I'm just being faithful. But when I'm celebrated, that's a clue from heaven. Stay in this arena. Stay operating under this anointing. And so what you say to people is, I want to thank you for that encouragement. It helps me to center my purpose and my genius. And I give God glory because I know I was made for this. I was made for this. And when I do it, I feel His joy. And when I leave that person, I say, Lord, it's so great to know that I'm in the middle of your purpose. Thank you for the way you've made me. I celebrate the gifts you've given me. And what happens is you break the religious spirit and you start to go higher. And God said, because you turned it into praise to me, now I can up your genius level because you have a pattern to resist pride that actually is based in truth.
Jeez. Okay.
Because if you beat yourself down, I can see God say, well, we can't really do any more because he's really going to mangle his whole head.
Oh. Got it.
I get tired of him hitting himself. After we celebrate him, I think maybe we need to give him a padded helmet.
Dude.
Okay, let's move on. But you get the
Good.
picture.
Yes.
So when I am celebrated, and think about it this way, when somebody comes and celebrates me, my response to them, if I turn it away, there might be somebody they will not celebrate because it didn't work, who could be actually thinking suicidal thoughts. But now we've taken away a tool of life because of a religious spirit, and somebody that actually is on the edge needs to hear it, but we shut it off. So the first thing we need to do is say, I want to thank you for celebrating me. It really, you don't know how much encouragement it is. Don't ever stop that. And so you encourage them in their celebration. And you know, I thank God for the way he made me, and I give him praise, but I enjoy being me. And I'm going to tell you something. Now that you've celebrated me, I'm going to tell you something. You have a gift. And I know what God has made me to do. But if you'll find your gift, I'm telling you, you're going to love your life more. And so it's like I had one guy say to me, he said, Dale, the prophetic thing, you're just so awesome at it. I said, I know, that's what I was made for. I said, I only have one question. What did he make you for? Because whatever it is, it's awesome.
Oh, that's genius.
It's
so
awesome.
You help push them upward while they're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so...
That's great, dude.
It's like a whole different way of keeping out of pride. I just pull other people up. I don't put myself down. Putting yourself down is actually a religious spirit. And actually the spirit of Christ is to lift up. The anointing is to lift up. And you're not anointed if you put yourself down. That is not humility, that is stupidity. And you know what I find in the world?
What?
The world that doesn't know the Lord, when they succeed and people celebrate them, they don't put themselves down. They keep on going up. And we wonder why a lot of Christians cannot go up to certain levels. It's because of a religious spirit the devil has put on the church. And remember, the devil is actually more comfortable hanging out in church than a bar. He was raised in a pretty holy place. He would prefer to go to church than a witch hunt or a group of witches. He already has them. He's after the genius that God wants to manifest through his people. And actually, because if you manifest the wisdom and the life of God, actually somebody who doesn't know him, who's doing what you do, it draws them in because they see something different that is alongside of what they're called to do. It's called influence of purpose.
Well, that settles that. You fixed me.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Jake, how you feeling?
I was crying, so that was great. That was a good time.
I don't believe it. I didn't see it on camera.
Yeah, because I kept looking away the whole time, getting my eyes closed. It's great.
Yeah, I have to find this because what you're saying reminded me of something that I have written in one of your books. Oh, okay. You wrote, "The enemy will try to devalue our present activity as we are about to step into a new assignment. He questions our motivation and attacks our value in front of others. The enemy's greatest fear is that we will move into our position of greater purpose." This sounds like what you're doing even with like receiving from other people. That could be a tool that God uses so that the enemy does not devalue what we're doing and keep us stuck. You tie this into the story of David was taking food to his brothers, but he did it with excellence.
Yeah.
Everything he did it with excellence. So have you ever had seasons in your life when you're doing something that's unseen and you feel very devalued in what you're doing? And you wrote another time, like, what God will put people that are very talented around you to judge, to kind of clean your heart from insecurity.
Yeah.
And how do we wrestle with, there are a lot of people who are watching this who are like, I would love to be Dale. I would love to be what these guys are doing. But right now they're carrying food to their brothers. You know, how do you stay motivated in your season?
Yeah. First of all, I want to make a statement.
Okay.
Until somebody accuses you, an older brother accuses you of having a wicked heart, you're not a David. Okay. Eliab stood head and shoulders taller than David. He stood there watching David being anointed as the next king of Israel when Samuel thought it was him. And Eliab saw the smile on Samuel's face, say, surely the Lord's anointed stands in front of me. And he saw that smile go to rejection. And then he saw his younger brother being chosen. So what happens, I'm going to play this backwards. I'm going to say it again. Until you have a brother in the church who's older accuse you of having a wicked heart, you've not moved forward like David. Because what will happen, the older brother will judge you according to their heart. Mm-hmm. And they say, if I was to do what David was doing, it would be to gain a place of prominence. It would be the pride. It would be because God already judged his heart as not right. Eliab, God said his heart isn't right. So people will judge you that if they were to do what you're doing because you love God and have a greater vision, they feel you're doing it to be the center of attention because that's where they live. They live on that street. They think your mailbox is on that street.
Wow.
You live in a different town.
Yeah.
Not even on the same street. Because you're not living for yourself. You're living for him, and then he starts to live through you. And it's a whole different dynamic that people don't understand. And some of you have learned to follow Christ, but you've not learned to abide in him or him to abide in you. I put it this way. Until you understand that God fits in you and you fit in God, you're not going to change this earth. There are many people that go to heaven, but only a few will bring heaven to earth. That's the difference David did. He brought heaven to earth through all his trauma and drama. So in that, David is getting ready to face Goliath. He's entertaining after delivering the food. Hey, this guy is out here shouting, and he asks about it. And his brother said, who did you leave those few sheep with? Few sheep. He's devaluing David as David is trying to step up into a Goliath victory. Whenever the distraction becomes greater, know this, the attraction of the battle, a Goliath battle, is literally imminent. Think of it this way. The enemy will try to distract you before God can attract you because it takes a Goliath to reveal a David. David was never seen as anything until Goliath went down. One victory can change your trajectory on one day. But he wasn't showing off. He was showing up. He already killed the lion and the bear. When nobody was watching, David created a vision mindset of victory over things bigger than him. I want to talk to a minute about this. I'm putting this in my second David book. David had a vision mindset that he could take down things bigger than him. God asked me one time, he said, Dale, how do you see yourself? I said, above average. He said, I have two problems with that. I'm sure he had more. He said, first of all, I didn't die for you to be above average. I died for you to win. That was a shock. You know, to me, that sounded proud, you know, if I was the best. He said, it's not about, he said, second of all, above average means you're comparing yourself with somebody else.
Jeez.
And God said, how can you compare a sprinter to a marathon runner? You're not even in the same race, and you're trying to compare yourself. And this is stupidity at the highest level. He said, I will judge you according to the way I've gifted you, not the way I've gifted your brothers or sisters or anybody else around you.
Wow.
And this is a part, I know when God created you, I don't care if you're under this, if you're hearing my voice, God created you to win. Sin made you a loser. When you were born again, you got your right back to win again. You're not a loser that got saved. You're a winner that got corrupted with sin, who God brought back into winning status. If you don't understand that, your identity is you're a loser trying to win. I ask this question of people. If I could give you 3 victories, would you rather be a winner that had, change it. You had 1 victory and 4 losses. Would you rather be a winner, or would you rather be a loser who had 4 victories and 1 loss? See, most people would say, well, I'll take the 4 victories and 1 loss. But the problem is you're a loser, so the 4 victories you're going to end up losing because that's who you are. The guy that just wins 1 time after losing 4 times, which 80% of all millionaires today went bankrupt 3 times. If you've ever been bankrupt, failed, smile. 80% of all millionaires are you. Only 20% of millionaires that gave money to their kids, only 20% ever made it and kept it. So I'm just going to tell you, might as well go ahead and spend it, because 80% of them are going to lose it anyway. Okay. But do you get the picture here?
Yeah.
So what happened with this guy who only won 1 time? How did he overcome those average 3 bankruptcies? Because he never let an event change his identity of a success. Success will never change the identity of a loser, nor will a loss change the identity of a winner.
Yeah.
And I pray that your revelation that you are a winner would get so deep that in the middle of what looks like a loss becomes the greatest place. You know, when I was down to $50, lost $500,000, I was stepping in to over $5 million I could not see. Took longer than I thought, became more than I ever believed. So I'm a testimony. I don't just have what I call a theological position. I actually have a journey of David.
That is beautiful. Yeah, the identity piece is major for people, especially people who are feeling like they're going through the bottom, and they lose track of who they are in the middle of that.
Yeah.
You know,
do not let a bad day think you have a bad ending. A bad day is an invitation for a greater thought with a great ending.
Yeah, you said that. You said a bad day is not a bad ending. I remember writing that down.
Yeah.
That was just a couple weeks ago. Is that going in your new book?
Yep. I'm going to talk about it some more, but we can keep on going.
Here's another thing. Well, Jake, do you have anything?
One of the things that I've thought about, and I feel like you'd have some interesting perspective on this, is that David goes through different stages in his life. And everything in his life is preparing him to be king, but he probably didn't have any idea he was going to be king until Samuel came along. What is from what you studied with David, what is like the mindset or the vision to have around everything you're doing now is preparing you for a future thing, but you don't even know what that future thing is? David had no idea what he was stepping into, but yet he was already prepared for it. Mm-hmm. So I think the question I'm asking is, what does it look like to stay present with what you're doing and focused on the vision of the future and balancing those both at the same time?
Yeah. We must learn how to entertain the extraordinary while living in the ordinary. As David was entertaining being the next king of Israel, when he saw the lion and the sheep, he entered into the extraordinary while living in the ordinary. Most shepherds would not put their lives at risk, like a lamb or two, no big loss.
Right.
But David saw it differently because he started from a vision side. One of the things you have to think of is, I would just throw out like Colonel Sanders, who literally did not come into a business till he was in his 80s. dreams in life can hit at any different time, but like even for me, being a youth leader, elder, assistant pastor, pastor, apostle, prophet, I feel that the most important thing of my whole life is being a writer of books. Because my books are like, and David Perceived He is King, it's now 9 languages, it's going around the world. I will have people come up to me and tell me how the book has changed their life. Actually, after I'd written it, there was a man who had helped edit it. He was sitting in a church of about 5,000, and the preacher was preaching on identity. And afterwards, he went up to me and said, "You read Dale's book," never mentioned my name or book. And he said, "How do you know?" He said, "I helped edit it, and I heard some of his one-liners." So this is a part.
He didn't give you credit?
No.
Wow. Cheap shot.
Yeah, but this is the deal. I always say this: if you don't care who gets the credit, you can have more influence. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he used it, that what I have is helping other people, that becomes my reward. I actually have to get over the fact that I didn't get the credit, but God will make it up in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, he will. You were telling me too about we'll save that for the next one. Can you briefly talk about, we've talked not much, but a little bit about the orphan spirit and then the bastard spirit. And do you have the ability to talk about these two things? Because nobody talks about the bastard spirit, but a lot of people talk about the orphan spirit. What are those spirits and how do you get free from these?
Well, first of all, an orphan spirit is normally part of a very successful person, because to overcome the feeling of not belonging that creates value, you believe that you have to literally perform to be accepted. And so if I can perform to this level, they will accept me. The problem is they accepted you off of your performance, so it never becomes a place of peace, but actually fuels, I have to perform higher. I remember Navratilova, the tennis player, after she won 3 Grand Slams.
Okay.
And she just reflected. She said, "I didn't realize it wasn't going to make that much difference to me." She was expecting something greater that she would feel and carry. And I will tell you this, if you carry an orphan spirit cannot carry victories. It literally is like having pockets with holes. You put money in and it falls to the ground. You put dreams in, they fall to the ground, even accomplished dreams. You have no ability to retain victories if you have an orphan spirit. So it's like you need a fix of another success. But if you're a son, you have the joy and you feel, I belong. I'll just say that again, I belong. And you know, God made you so you belong, but the closer you get to him, the more that belonging becomes actually a greater grip and a greater peace that you know. I love what God said to Jeremiah. He said, "You know, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb." It's like, hey, I know all about you. If you know about me, we're going to do some things together. And Jeremiah says, "You know, I can't do this." And God said, "You can't say that. You can't say certain things negative about yourself and fulfill what God has called you to do." That's an orphan spirit. Like, I mean, think about this. God talks to you and you say, "Well, I know I can do that. You made me to do this." No one ever says that. Moses even said to God, could you get someone else? Mm-hmm. You know, but every time God talks to us, it's an invitation for an identity shift. Now, the bastard spirit is basically a curse that occurs if somebody is born out of wedlock up to 10 generations back. You could not even go in the temple of God. So there's something about illegitimacy. And, you know, all of our families are somebody crazy, it happens. So the fact of everybody in 10 generations back in your family, everybody was born after marriage is probably pretty slim. Okay, so what happens is you can be around people, you can laugh, be the life of the party, you go to bed, you feel like the loneliest person in the world. Because you you don't have a treasure chest in your soul to actually enjoy relationships because you're struggling to be accepted. Again, in struggling to be accepted, you prostitute and you actually sell yourself through humor, through success, for other people to love you. You're paying them to love you. If you want to, I have to perform to be loved. Versus when I walk in a room, I know I'm loved. And as I sow love, I receive love back. Do you know that if you will actually honor people, that you actually start a system of honor that actually starts taking your life to the next level? A lot of people are waiting around for somebody to honor them. Wrong move. Start asking God, who can I honor? Who can I honor? Because what I sow, I reap. And in it, and I just want to say this, a little bit of a test. I want to honor you, Taylor, for what you're doing to help people. When I was up in Apple Creek, this woman with almost tears said, Taylor has meant so much to my husband who struggled, who felt so disenfranchised, who felt weird. But as Taylor has talked, it's like it's brought his identity together. So you're changing people's identity through your identity. Not just what you teach, but who you are is a gift that helps them to live as a gift.
Right.
And that's awesome. And I celebrate you for that.
Let's see if I get it right. Thank you for celebrating me for that. Never stop encouraging other people. What does God put in you to do?
And one other thing, you need to say this, and thank you for helping me center on my God purpose.
Yes.
It keeps me focused.
Yes.
Isn't that good stuff? See,
Yeah.
it's like you have to.
But you smiled at me and made me nervous.
Okay.
See, I was good until I got that grandfather smile, and I was like, "Oh, I better not mess this up." He just taught me this.
Do you know what? I have to remind myself because I was raised in a church that they would have called that pride.
Yeah.
And most people were.
Most people do.
Most people were.
Yeah.
And so there we go. But see, that's the breakthrough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as you talk about this, that when you know God has made you a gift, I want you to think about this. Esther lost both of her parents. She's in a foreign land. And, but God had a reason for her parents to be missing. Because no good Jewish parents are going to let their beautiful daughter marry a king that has a harem. It's in the Bible, read it. But her uncle, who sat in the gates, said, who knows that if God created you for such a time as this? Her beauty opened up the door to the king's heart to become a voice for the Jewish people. Now, everybody carries a beauty. Maybe for you, it's your intellect. Maybe it's your ability to organize things. Not everybody's beauty is in their face, even though you're pretty good looking, Taylor.
Thank you.
But
Thank
the beauty, sometimes it's people's intelligence. It's their voice to sing. It's actually their creative gift. But I will tell you this, God put beauty in everyone.
That's good. Yeah.
So this is the part I want to come. You were created for such a time as this. You come into the kingdom for such a time as this. And if you understand that when you come into a place of greater honor than you've ever been before, see, the orphan spirit would say, I'm just going to suck it up. I'm just going to suck it up. The bastard spirit say, well, I'm here, but I just don't believe I belong here, or I feel lucky to be here. And I tell people, once you're in a place of honor you've never been in before, enjoy it for 5 seconds and figure out why God has you there. Because there's an assignment that's there for you that's beyond making you feel better about yourself. God has you there for a purpose to help somebody else, not to help yourself. People will always help themselves out will actually end up losing even when they win.
Yep. True. Did you just yawn?
That wasn't on, but I was going into the that's deep.
Ren's bored.
He's not bored. I can tell you from experience. I yawn even when I'm interested.
You wrote something in Shattering the Limitations of Pain.
Yeah.
You said bitterness is fellowshipping with the devil over your past.
Yes. Whenever you become bitter, you're looking at something in your past that you feel hijacked your dream, and you're using it as an excuse not to go forward. And instead of you having faith beyond it in passing the test, you're mad because it came into your life. Oh. And literally, when you become bitter, you're actually giving the enemy the high hand over your future because of something in your past you've not looked at correctly. I actually had God walk me through my life, and he started showing me all the places that I was hurt, all the places I was broken. And he said to me, now I want you to show it from my viewpoint. I had to separate you from this because this would have limited you. I had to make this stop so it would invite you into another level of your authority you didn't know you had. I had to take away this from you so I could give you more. I actually, my father, he gave the building, that $500,000 building, to my brother-in-law, to pastor, then to my other brother, who I worked with for a season just recently. But at one point, my brother, who had the building, and he couldn't get people to come, and he just came and asked me in a very honest way. He said, Dale, you always have people, and it just seems like the church doesn't want to grow. He said, explain it to me. I said, Jay, that's the deal. I said, when Dad took the building, he said, I'll keep the building, you get people. And I said, my whole life, wherever I go, I get people. God told me, he said, you were hurt, but if you'll go back and listen to what your father said, he blessed you. And I said, God, what do you mean? He said, he blessed you that wherever you would go, you would have people.
Wow.
Some of the things that have been very hurtful was actually God separating you from something that wasn't your purpose.
Yep.
And God had to let Abraham and Lot have arguments till Abraham separated so God could bless Abraham to the level he wanted to. There are people that will help you into your future, but they will not live in the blessing that is specifically yours. They have a different one. It doesn't mean a lesser, but their blessing is not the same as yours. And sometimes we try to help people live in our same blessing, but it's not a blessing for them. And so God will separate. And God watched over Lot even in a very difficult place. We could look at that. God even called him righteous. But Abraham's blessing was separate. And so don't ever think that if you don't do what God has called you to do, it'll get done on earth. And don't show up in heaven giving God excuses.
Big statement.
How do you have those you're having these conversations with God of asking, why did you do this? Are you getting to a place of frustration? Then God's just like, all right, here's why this happened. Here's why this happened. Because now what you're saying is triggering so many thoughts in my memory of I can't believe this happened. I messed this up. And I'm actually creating almost self-guilt in this. I'm like, what is that? What does it look like to cultivate that conversation to get those types of answers from God? And where does your heart need to get to?
Yeah, well, it's heart, but it's also, you have to look not at the event, but what happened afterwards that was in front of you because of something else being missing. And you actually become analytical. Okay, I had this, which I really loved, but when that was gone, I didn't really like my life, but actually it lifted me up into another place where I had to go into something different. And God said, I actually had to destroy your little comfort zone because you were starting to zone out in comfort, and I had to take that away to make you reach higher, and actually you were going to settle for less than what I made you for. David, think about this. David wrote the Psalms. He could have cut albums, been a musician, worship leader, never became king. He could have been a warrior, never became king. His purpose was to be king. A lot of people will stop at the success. Hey, this is so good. Yeah, I know it's good, but is that your ultimate purpose? For some people, it is. So stop there and park there. You know, Taylor, I want you to think of this. I don't know your story of worship, but I know this. I think God probably allowed it to be sabotaged, even through people in some way, because he had something more for you, but you couldn't see it when that was taken away.
No.
Do you know why? Because the success of the present day was blinding you from your ultimate purpose.
Wow.
And God's saying, I'm going to do you a favor. You won't like it at first, but you're going to love it in the end. It's sort of like with your son, there's going to be a day you take off the training wheels and he's not going to be real happy.
Yep.
And
maybe today.
So I remember I took it off my oldest son, Ben. I took off his training wheels and he took off riding. I ran behind him holding the balance. He thought he had it all together. And after about a quarter of a block, I let go. But he didn't know I was actually hanging on till he gained balance in this new level. So whenever God rips off training wheels, he's saying, I'd like to move to another level.
Yeah.
And we never like it. I will tell you this, if you look at a situation you really did not enjoy, and you just think about the hurt, bitterness comes in, but if you look at what God forced you into, now, I'm going to just take a natural thing. I already talked about it. Do you know when that organization that did not cover my dad and I? Mm-hmm. Well, then I had to find a new covering because my dad stayed with it and I didn't want to be competitive. It forced me to join a network who was Bishop Bill Hammond, who's a pioneer in the prophetic, which I'm called to be a prophet. Do you see? Mm-hmm. And literally, and there's another whole story behind this and we'll talk about, but now I'm on the board of governors under him with a group of people. I have ministered. I'm writing a book on the prophetic. God forced me through that hurt to meet the man his identity would shift my identity into my purpose.
Yep.
And I'm going hurt, and God's actually getting excited. Dale's getting closer to his purpose. He thinks all that was about, well, look at the church and my relationship with my father. And God said, I'm willing to sacrifice all that to get him to what I made him for, and I'll restore the other later. But right now, keep on moving, Dale. You're getting closer to what I made you for.
Yeah.
You don't like it now, but you're going to love it.
It's amazing to realize this in hindsight. The challenge is always guarding your heart and your perspective in the middle of it when you can't see it.
Yeah.
And I found that the thing that people tend to struggle with the most is when they begin to open up their mouth and to complain and curse themselves and to then they get lost and they would fail the test, as you would say, right as they're transitioning from one platform to another
season.
Season.
You know what complaining reveals? You do not see your identity matching your new season. Complaining reveals you don't see yourself correctly.
Yeah.
Because you need to start, when you come into a challenge, you need to think, I was made for this. Say, well, why? Well, it wouldn't be in front of me if it wasn't.
Right.
There are a lot of things not in front of me. This is in front of me because I was made for this.
Yeah.
I trust. I'm not just looking for the path of ease. I'm looking for the path of purpose. And if it's in front of me, it's part of my assignment of growth in identity And you think about it, here David is, he's killing Goliath. All of a sudden, everybody's saying, I know you're 17, David, but will you lead us into battle?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's saying, and this is the deal. He didn't wait till he was 20. One victory can jump your identity into a future you don't think you're ready for. But God already knows you are.
Yeah. 100%. It's good. Jake, you all right? You still with us?
Yeah. It's just crazy to me that David was like, cool, we'll go with that. Like, to be at that place of identity and trust to just go, cool, let's run forward. I can't tell you how many times, by the way, but everything you're saying is just like blowing up my brain with so many questions. And I'm going to have to rewatch this and put a bunch of notes down. But I think of so many times in my life where I've been gifted with a lot of things at a young age. And in the name of humility, wisdom, and being well submitted to leadership, I would see the Lord gifting me with something. And then I would slow down and I would artificially stifle it. And then go, actually, let's have this person do it who's not gifted in it as much, or they shouldn't be leading. So I don't even have a question with that. I'm just like, wow. And if you have words to speak into it, go for it.
Yeah, I was in a meeting and the Lord said, I want you to step forward and say these words because they need to be spoken. And I'm like, God, I don't know how people are going to respond. See, I'm still insecure. I don't know if I should do it. What if I go up and they don't let me? And they would have, I believe. And after a longer pause than should have happened because I didn't do it, somebody else stepped forward and they said some things that were not appropriate to the moment. And after they were done, I was like, oh my. And God said, see there? I said, what? He said, that's your fault. Because you didn't move. The person who wasn't supposed to did. Don't let that happen again.
Ouch.
To whom much is given, much is required. And I just recently was in a situation, I'm talking about in the last month, where God said, I want you to go up and give a word. It was the end of a service. It was not by request. It was by his direction. There were some things I had to overcome. When I went up, they were dismissing people, but I went up and I just talked with Bishop Hammond, and it wasn't like a planned thing. It was a conference, and he said, "That's God." And he called and had Apostles Tom and Jane come over, and the thing is, there's other people there. Maybe they're going up to give a word to be seen and heard. I don't want to appear like that. And I said, God, can I do it privately? He said, no, you need to do it now. And so as I went up and he called over, and when I shared the word with Apostles Tom and Jane, it's like joy filled them. But I had to overcome fear walking up of, this is in the plan and they have a tight schedule and all this. And so I shared with Bishop Bill Hammond. And so I said, you're supposed to release a double blessing over them. They come over and kneel before him. He's in a chair because he's 90 years old. He doesn't stand all the time. He lays hands and starts to pray. A wave of anointing goes over the whole meeting. People come to me and say, when that happened, it shifted something. Something happened for them because I obeyed God. But you know what I had to overcome? A lot of people want to go up and give a prophetic word so that people will see them. And so I thought, well, when I walk up, people are going to start looking, oh, there goes Dale. He's, wants to be in the limelight. Because I've been around, I'm not a novice. But I had to get onto the purpose. And I will tell you this, there's two sins in life. One is people trying to do what they shouldn't do, but they will do it in the next season, but they're not prepared for it now. God gives promises, but he doesn't give the platform. It's to prepare. The worst sin is people God's prepared who won't move forward. Because it's wasted expertise. And sometimes when people become experts, they do not become as compliant to obey in situations, and actually moments of greatness are missed because they did not move by the Spirit of God. And there are many things I could share about that story, but I know this, that it so shifted. But I was that close, but I knew I just went walking past my wife, and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm doing." She said, "I'm praying for you." I said, "I'm praying for me too." And but so if it was easy, anybody could do it.
Yeah.
And it's hard for those to whom much is given. What?
Much is required.
Do you know why a lot of people don't want to know who they are? They don't want to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God just blessed me. In other words, what they're saying is, I wasn't made for this, it just happened. Because if I have an identity, I become responsible for that area.
Yep.
If I stop a thief, being a pastor, that's a blessing. But if I stop a thief as a policeman that's undercover, it's a responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. Been there. Still there.
Yeah. So this is a question. What are you responsible for? God did not mantle you to make you feel better about your life. He mantled you to make life better around you.
Yep.
Wow.
That's a good one.
That's really good.
I have a meeting, so we'll have to wrap here pretty quick. But we're going to have you back on a couple of times. What's one thing that you would say if somebody wants to get closer to this identity? Is it just spending more time with God? Is it cutting out other influences? Like if somebody is watching this and they're like, this all sounds amazing and I'm encouraged by this, but I don't have the relationship that Dale has with God where God just speaks to him, how would you advise them to get that?
Okay. So first of all, I would start with you. There'll never be another you in this universe. Your gifting mix, your intelligence, your social ability, add in a whole bunch of other things. You are God's one shot at something. There's something so special about you. Until you believe that, you'll not interface with Father God in a way that's actually meaningful to your purpose. I want to tell you, there'll never be another you. And in that, when you understand that's a gift and you start unwrapping the gift God has made you, that becomes literally where your destiny and your unwrapping of your identity starts to unwrap other people's identity. And when you win inside yourself, that victory of identity, you start gifting to other people where they start to win in who they were created. I believe it all starts with you believing there's nobody else like you and nobody else can take your place. Nobody else can steal your thunder, your destiny, because nobody was made like you. And out of that, when you thank him for who he made you, that worship starts a conversation with Father God that need or help does not. Because now I'm relating to him out of identity, not out of need,
That's true.
help. And actually, this is the conversation every father wants to have with his son about his identity, not about just helping him, loving him. But when we realize this, and I will end with this, until you can see your face and his face, which is actually the mirror of your identity, you cannot enter into the greatness your father carries, because I'm telling you, you look like your father in a certain way.
It's amazing. Thank you for making the time to be here.
I've so enjoyed it.
It's amazing. We'll got to do it again. Any parting words of wisdom, Jake? Sir Jacob Bryan, hailing from Franklin.
Don't stop moving forward.
Wait, what? You laughed. We couldn't understand you.
Don't stop moving forward. I feel like that is the call of this episode. Don't stop moving forward. There is no reason to stop. And don't stop till you're dead.
There we go. Love you guys. See you next week.